This episode of the podcast is being sponsored by the new Rabbi Jervel comic book series. Rabbi Jervel has a special place in the hearts of Jewish children, or as he would famously say, Yiddish Kinderlach. Thousands have learned about all parts of Yiddishkeit, the Parsha, and have been soothed to sleep by Rabbi Jervel. Recently, Rabbi Jervel has a new series on halacha, in which he relates stories with halacha woven in throughout the stories. These audio stories are now being converted into comic book form and are a fun and exciting way to teach kids about halacha. They even include a section in the back of explaining each malacha that was discussed in the book. So, for example, Mavir, Goizes, Sevea, Boina, Soiser, and in each part they refer back to the story. And now in the story, how it is, so it's a comic book. And in each part of the story, it's a story, but if there comes up something that's related to halacha, so there's like a badge of sorts that tells you the halacha, and then there's a open Sefer Torah, and inside of that, the text explains in brief the malacha, and then in the back there's a longer section that explains the malacha in general and how it pertains to the story. The first two books in this series are now available. The first one is Falsely Accused, and the newer volume that was recently released is called Sugar Shvili's Secret. These both they're more coming soon. And these are available from Israel Bookshop. Check out the links in the show's notes if you're interested in purchasing the books. And as always, if anybody has any comments on the podcast or to sponsor an episode or to support the show, please email me, sfarimchatter@gmail.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Sfarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by R Manes Blumenfrucht, who is the author of the newly released Sefer Chalav Treifah, which is about the kosher milk controversy in America, in particular as it relates to Chalav Stam. And he has an entire Sefer just written on this topic. So thank you, Manes, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I was born and bred in Brooklyn. I went to Yeshivas Kamenetz for Mesivta. Then I went to the Mir Yeshiva in Flatbush. I went by Raveli Brudny. Then I went to Eretz Yisrael. I went to Brisk. And then I had the schus to start a yeshiva. by Rav Nata Greenblatt, with Rav Nata Greenblatt in Memphis. We had a few Bachrim come down, and we went by him for a year, which Baruch Hashem I was zeicha to get smicha from him. And I went to Lakewood afterwards, and I'm currently in Beis Yosef Nevardik by Rav Mata Yafen in Brooklyn.
Okay, so I think we should start off. We'll get to how you got into this. But I think before we start off, people are listening probably, sometimes I go different ways with this. I think here, let's give an overview of the Sefer, which is of the topic, and then we'll get into how you personally got into it and to write about it. Just give an overview, and then we'll obviously go into like the specifics later on.
Yeah, so around 30 years ago, on Chalav Yisrael farms, there were mashkichim who were made aware that many cows had operations on them. And it raised a serious shaila of treifas, right? Milk from a cow, that's a treifa. The meat and the milk of a cow, that's a treifa, is asur. So it was a very big controversy, a big tumult, because on those farms, which the mashkichim were on, they were producing Chalav Yisrael. There was a lot of, there was a significant percentage of them above shir shishim, above bittul, which is 1.6%. And there was a shayla regarding the kashrus of the milk. It was a big shayla of a hefsa meruba. There was a lot of cheeses. They say hundreds of thousands of dollars of cheese. A Rav told me who dealt with the shayla. It was a very big controversy, and the Rabbonim at the time dealt with the shayla. When the shayla was first discovered, it was in 1994 in Tafshin and Dawud in Elul, at the end of the summer. And right away, some Rabbonim put out an alert that people shouldn't eat any dairy anymore. Some Rabbanim then came out 2 days later. Rav Chaim Kohn, Shuita, put out an alert to stop eating, and then he said that 2 days later it was okay. And some Rabbanim wrote that all the milk was asur, and everybody had to kasher their kelim. It was like a very chamer shayla. So, and the Rabbanim wrote tshuvas on the shayla, and there was tshuvas from Rav Chatzko Roth, Zochron Avracha, from Rav Nasha Klein, from Rav Yishal Belsky, Zochron Avracha. They all wrote tshuvas on it, in addition to Rav Moshe Heinemann, Shvita, and Rav Mendel Zilber from Satmar. They all wrote tshuvas on the shayla. And they basically were dealing with how to, b'diavad, work with the milk products, the hefsem meruba, the cheeses, the milk, all the stuff that was produced, the kalim, right, for the consumer. Now, their main avenue of heter that they needed at that time, it was b'diavad, they were using, if the surgeries render the animal treif, that was not so pashut. They relied on a lot of paiskim that are not lechatchila, and some said that the milk was aser, they didn't give any heterim, and some said that b'diavad you could rely on shitas that we normally would not rely on lechatchila. But that was really just then, 1994. From then on, the Rabbonim said there's a tshuva from Skver, there's a tshuva from Rav Shalom Gross from Belz, Rav Shalom HaKohen Gross, they all wrote that they instituted systems that they would remove cows from going on. So the Chalav Yisrael farms claim that from then on, the issue is not relevant to them, and that's why many people did not hear about the Shiloh. They just consume milk products and everything is fine. That was back then. That was what the Shiloh happened. The issue was going forward. It wasn't relevant to Chalav Yisrael anymore because they removed the cows. The problem was Chalav Stam. So Chalav Stam, everybody knows it's a colloquial term. People call a name for something people don't like that it's called Chalav Stam because either it's Chalav Yisrael or not. Some people say it's called Chalav Stam to make it less severe. Some people say it's called Chalav Stam so it shouldn't trick a person who thinks that it's Chalav Yisrael to thinking it's Chalav Yisrael. Rav Moshe held Rav Moshe's tshuva saying that it's Chalav Yisrael mamash. That's what Rav Moshe is saying. So many people with Chalav Stam is again milk in America. The din in Shulchan Aruch is that milk that was milked by a non-Jew without a Jew supervising is aser. That's the din in Shulchan Aruch. Siman Kuf Tesvav. Rav Moshe said that since in America there's government supervision, if somebody would adulterate milk and switch cow's milk with, let's say, camel's milk or something else like that, he would be subject to fines. His business would be shut down. So Rav Moshe said that fear of penalty substitutes for a Jew, and the milk is Chalav Yisrael. That's what Rav Moshe says. There's a tshuva from Rav Henkin. Rav Henkin seems to say this also. He says it from the Chazon Ish and Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. So that's Chalav Stam. Now, that's all the government supervision that Rav Moshe was talking about. He wrote the tshuva in 1950. That was talking about government supervision to make sure milk is 100% cow's milk and is not adulterated, right? If you get farmland milk in the store, it says 100% pure cow's milk. That's what the government supervision's on. There's no government supervision on this issue of the surgeries, cows that are operated on. There's no government supervision. They're regular cows. Their milk is 100% cow's milk, and it could be sold legally like any other milk. So the Rabbonim, many Rabbonim said that even those who relied on Rav Moshe Feinstein should not continue to rely on Rav Moshe Feinstein because there was a new problem of cows that were operated on that raised a serious Shiloh of Treifah, and there was no cow removal because, again, Chalav Stam farm has no mashkichim on the farms, right? It's government supervision. It's farms owned by non-Jews. So those farms, since they had no cow removal and no systems in place, many Rabbonim said that Chalav Stam is aser because of the issue of Chalav Treifah.
Now, let's just to clarify, first of all, something. You keep mentioning the surgery. Just clarify the actual procedure. First of all, what was the actual issue with the cows that they were performing this procedure? And then I know that I'm not the specifics of which procedures. That's something you discuss. We'll get that later. I mean, just in general for now, what was the issue? What was the surgery?
Right. So the disease is left displaced abomasum. The abomasum is the keva in the Mishnah. The Mishnah in the beginning of Ayah Treifah says that the abomasum, the keva, if it gets a puncture, it's a treifah. Now, the abomasum lies on the right side of the cow. That's its correct anatomical position on a healthy cow. Sometimes the cow's stomach, the abomasum, fills with gas and it distends and it dislocates to the left side of the cow. That raises a sakana for the cow. It's a danger. They do surgery to correct that. Now, usually when this happens, this issue starts, they say, I've seen statistics, and this has been really another issue that should be clarified. This issue really, primarily, I saw number 90%, and many people confirmed it. 90% of the time, it occurs on farms, cows that are in their first month of lactation. A cow that gives birth starts producing milk and nursing its calf. That milk, they take the milk for milk to sell in the stores. But that when a cow goes from not milking before it gave birth, so it's a dry cow. it's a cow that it's not giving milk, so it's not eating that much. Then it switches over to becoming a cow that's producing milk to feed its young. That cow, since it's such a change in its feed and its calorie intake, it causes a stress on the cow, which very often leads to this disease. It leads to other diseases, and there are other causes. But at that stage, those cows, which are transition stage cows, transitioning from dry cows, not giving milk, to giving milk, those cows are the ones that are prone to this issue. And that's when the disease happens. Now, I just want to point out that the actual disease does not render an animal treifah. The disease itself is, this is for many reasons, and Hilchos Treifos, I'll just present one. There's a mini not treifos. There's a certain number of treifos. When whether it's 70, like the Rambam says, or 18, it's machlokes or poskim. The point is, we have the treifos the way they are. A treifa has to have two qualifications, be'ikar, according to most Rishonim. Has to have a chesaron, has to have a wound, a makkah, and it has to also have the wound that will kill it within 12 months. Now, this disease, even if you were going to tell me it would die in 1 day, it's like cancer. Cancer is not render animal treifa because it's not a makkah, it's not a chesaron. So this disease does not render the animal treifa. So if you know a farm has 100% cows with the disease, but they were not operated on, the milk is 100% kosher. It's not a shayla. The shayla, the surgery that is used to correct it, that's when the shayla comes, because they open the cow, they open the flanks of the side or the belly, the right side, the left flank. They move the abomasum back to the right side, its correct place, and they anchor it there. Now, when they open the cow, that is a shayla of Basra Chayfes or Vakaras. Rav Yossi says that that's one of the treifas. They cut open the walls. That's the first one. And when they're dealing with the actual abomasum, which is dislocated and filled with ears, so very often they have to puncture it to let out the ear. Right? A guy gave me a mushroom. One of the professors, he said that if you'd have a beach ball and you'd be pushing a beach ball into a pool, right? We know that it doesn't go down, right? It's full of ear. He said that's what it's like unless you let out the ear of the abomasum, it doesn't go down. So they let out the ear. That would be a shayla of treifos. And then when they move the abomasum back, they anchor it. They use stitches. So it's very often, that's part of the Sefer. Very often the stitches maybe go into the lumen of the cow and into the lumen of the abomasum, and that's another shayla of a nekev. So that's when the shayla came up, and that's what the Rabbonim were dealing with. Those two treifas on cows that had surgery.
Okay, so the one last thing before we get to the Sefer and your research, I mean, just back then and afterwards, obviously, like you said, for Chalav Stam, this is a real issue. I mean, I think was the Reish Matir with Rebelski and Tshuva. I mean, you want to talk about what his findings were and why he passed and it is okay? Because we'll just mention that, or anyone else you wanted to mention before we move on.
Right. So the main matirim that are known in the world being matir is for sure Rabbi Belsky is the most prominent as known. His tshuva, he wrote 2 tshuvas on the shayla. He wrote in Hamasaira. Both of them are printed in Shulchan Halevi. They're beautiful long tshuvas, and he mainly deals with over there the surgery. He's trying to say that the surgery was not an issue at all. Now again, Chalav Stam does not have any systems in place to remove the cows. So Rabbi Belsky, the way that they dealt with the shayla, Rabbi Belsky and Rav Moshe Heinemann, Shlita, they both dealt with the shayla saying that the surgeries don't render the animal treif, and therefore they nipped the shayla in the bud. They said that the shayla doesn't begin. That's how they dealt with the shayla. And Rabbi Belsky wrote a few stadim heter. He said treifas chayzav sheira. He said that it's a nekev zeshalai keneged zeh. He said that the chaylev tahar is sais in the nekev. He said a few things. Rav Heinemann used a little bit more, I would say, not lechatchila shitas. He says this, meaning shitas that the Marsham relied on, like the Ra'ah, shitas that were not used normally by the Paiskim, but they were mitzaref these Paiskim to say the surgeries don't make a treif, and that's why Chalav Stam, Hagam, there's no cow removal, has no issue, even though there is surgery being done to the cows.
Okay, and so you're saying, but on the Chalav Yisrael farms, they had the supervision, so they took them out, so there was just no issue. They made sure they didn't have these cows. I guess if a cow got this, just took it out and finished.
Yeah, the cows have ear tags, so when they come to do a run, the Chalav Yisrael farms, I mean, part of the farm is owned by Jews, so they are in control. But Chalav Yisrael very often is not like a farm with a Rebbe sitting on it that owns it. They go to a Geisha farm, and they go to person who owns it, the manager, and they tell him, and that person has records, and they remove the cows. It's a very big process. One of the guys I emailed with, he told me he does a cow removal, and he says that it's a very expensive thing it costs a lot of money to do the Chalav Yisrael. That's why it's expensive, because, one of the reasons, he said, because the cow removal is a very big thing that they do. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work by the mashgichim to do it.
Right. Okay. So now, what exactly was it that intrigued you about this? You decided that this was something that, now obviously you explained the basic overview, but why did you decide that this is something that you want to write about a sefer about? You there's a whole sefer here. I think there's obviously a lot of it is on that just about treifahs. But why did you, I'll mention, I think the sefer is around, I'm looking right now at over 200 pages. This is a big work on this. Why did you decide something you're going to go into and research and write a whole sefer on?
Right. So I weren't in Memphis, but I'm not sweet. I went Chulin, and the last parak, he actually wanted to do treifahs. He wanted to learn treifahs with us. He said it's very wondish, but some of the bachrim that came down said that treifahs is technical. They didn't want to do it, so we shelved it. We did shchita with him. So the last part of Chulin that I did not do was which is Tumatayra. The last part of the Yardea part was the treifahs. So I started when I got married in Kailo with my chavrusa, Chaim Leib Hutner, helped me a lot with a lot of stuff in the sefer. So I started doing treifahs, and I always had wanted to go through the Shiloh because I always heard about the Shiloh. One of my brothers had a Rebbe who wrote a sefer against Rabbi Belsky's heter. So I heard about the controversy. I wanted to see it, I wanted to learn it myself. And it's also very relevant. People don't even realize it. Chalav Stam, even if somebody will not consume Chalav Stam, no matter what circumstance, which there are many that don't, they don't realize that, or they do realize, but many don't realize that there are other kulas because of Ramosha that they rely on. First of all, which I think is the most relevant, people rely on dairy equipment stuff that's cooked in kalim that had Chalav Stam cooked in it previously. A lot of ices, black coffee, creamers. I could listen now for 2 hours. Stuff that's DE, Chav KDE, OUDE, all this stuff that's parav. People eat it after their fleishiks, and they're relying on Rav Moshe because, to a certain extent, because Chalav Akum, if Rav Moshe would not be correct, if you would say that the milk is 100% usher from Chalav Stam aspect, not about the treifahs, just about Chalav Akum, so the Ramah says that Chalav Akum asers kalim. You can't cook something in a pot and eat it that's cooked in Chalav Akum. But Rav Moshe, there are people who say b'shem Rav Moshe that even though Rav Moshe said about nefesh should be yachmer and should not eat Chalav Stam, there's no Indian to be machmer on kalim. Rav Henkin writes in a tshuva and Gvuras Eliyahu, he says that even those that are machmer on Chalav Akum are meiko on kalim. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky writes that there seems to have been already back then this attitude that kalim is much more kal. So that's all if we're dealing with Chalav Stam. If the shai was about Chalav Stam, so you could say whatever the svaras are. That for kalim there's a Ramah in Hilchos by Chalav that says that kalim are more kal. Whatever the svara is, but kalim you could say are more kal since people rely on Rav Moshe, and they drink Chalav Stam. So for kalim you could say that they're mekel. But if it's a shai of treifahs, you can't eat something that was cooked in a treifah pot. So it becomes a much more chamer to kashaywa. I remember speaking to people when I brought up the issue. They were like, I wouldn't touch Chalav Stam. And then I said, what about DE? They're like, because of the treifahs. They told me because of the treifahs problem. And I said, what about DE? And they were like blown away. Like, wow, that's a good point. There was a lot of that. It's relevant. There's also people that go out of town. People that live out of town, they don't have Chalav Yisrael. Any state that you're in that's not Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, there's no Chalav Yisrael. So if it's Chalav Treifah, it's a much more chamer d'kashayla. People that travel, right? That's also obviously when some people rely on Chalav Stam. And then this is one of the people in nursing homes and hospitals, elderly. There's some protein shakes and some milk and different stuff that are only made with Chalav Stam that people rely on. That's all good. If the shai was about Rav Moshe, then a lot of Rabbonim are mekel in certain circumstances that you could rely on Rav Moshe, even if you normally wouldn't, for Chalav Stam. But Treifah is a much more chamatik shayla. And the biggest shayla that people had told me already that I helped them with, Baruch Hashem, I'm happy that I had a yad in helping some people, is formula. People that will not touch they'll not touch Chalav Stam. Hasidic Yid, and I spoke to one of the biggest Rabbonim in Satmar about the Shaila, and he didn't write it's Asar in the Tshuva. He wrote a Tshuva on the Shaila, but he said that he took Chalav Stam with Chumrah, and he said that for formula they're Mekel, some Hasidim are Mekel, and I asked him, what about this Shaila? And he didn't know what to do when I asked him the Shaila. The Shach says in Yeridea that there is Timtum HaLev on an Issa D'Rabbanan. Somebody who, this milk, even if you would give me a heter, I could feed my child because it's formula, and a kid has a din of a chaywa, and you could give an Issa D'Rabbanan to a chaywa, the Bir Halacha says. But what about Timtum HaLev? It's very relevant, even for those that are not makbid, that are makbid on Chalav Yisrael mamish. It's a very relevant shayla, and it's much more chamer if we are to say that it's a treifa issue. It leads to a lot of problems. In addition to kashering, there are kulas with kashering chalav stam. If it's chalav treifa, it's a regular isser. So it's a much more chamer shayla. And when I was learning the sugyas, I decided that I want to see for myself what's going on and try to figure this out.
Okay, so I guess that probably explains. I guess the first 18 prakim here at the beginning of the Sefer, you went through the sugya, you went through treifas, you got involved in all things. But the interesting part, I guess, the main part that's interesting for the podcast, I assume what people will be talking to you about, it just in the street or whatever, is the part where you actually went through your research and you went through and you discussed, as you've already alluded to. Say here, you went from a different angle, not the angle of was the surgery. You went even before that. So, how did you start doing this process? I'm going to research this, I'm going to go into this and figure all this out. Or was it first that you went through the sugya of the treifas from what you were learning, and then you got to this after? How did that happen?
Right, so really the latter. I didn't intend to write a sefer here. That was not my intention. I decided to look into the surgeries, into all that issues. So when I was learning Elu Treifas, I got my hands on all the tshuvas. I got Rabbi Belsky's tshuva, Rav Chaim Cohn's tshuva. I had to get it from him. It's not printed. Rabbi Moshe Hanim's tshuva, everybody's tshuva. Rabbi Bleich wrote an article on it. I got everybody's tshuvas, and I started to figure out the details of the surgery. And I was comparing the facts of the surgeries, the way they were describing it, and then I was figure out the din of the cows based on the surgeries, that what their din is based on how the procedures are done. But there was really there was no consensus. What one Rav was writing, the way they do the surgery, another Rav was writing the opposite. One Rav wrote they puncture this organ, the other Rav said they do it this way, another Rav said they usually do puncture, they don't puncture, they cut here, they cut there. So I decided that I wanted to research it from scratch. I went back to the yesod, to the base, to try to figure out how the veterinarians do it themselves. I got my hands on some medical books, some veterinary books, and I started emailing professors. I would just get email addresses of professors and veterinarians, and I just started shooting out emails, as many emails as I could, thousands of emails, with questions exactly detailing the different, the parts that the Rabbonim that there was no consensus on. I wanted to see, what they were saying. So I was shooting out emails, one after the other, and I was getting responses. They were very nice. I made sure that I knew what I was talking about. I wrote a nice detailed email. There's nothing that a professor likes more, or a veterinarian, and somebody knows what they're talking about. I spoke to veterinarians on the phone for hours. They were so happy that somebody cared about their profession. So I had actually some good context. I still do, that helped me very much understand certain things. There was one part with the chaylev, that one Rav was saying they puncture at this organ, and the other one saying that it's not true. And I just trying to figure it out. So that was one issue that took a long time. It's in my Sefer and Siman, I think it's Siman Yud. That was what I was busy with. And after I finished doing all this, my opinion was, which I'm not a qualified Rav to paskin for anybody, but my personal opinion was that the heterim were very shver. They were shasat chaketerim, maybe somebody who needed to rely on it, but many people ichal stam, they view it as if it's the same. They live in Brooklyn and Lakewood and Monsey, anywhere, and they'll just go buy it without thinking twice. Now, they rely on Rav Moshe, Rav David Feinstein. They rely on people who said that there's no Indian to be machmer or whatever. Rav Moshe did say it, but people are mekel, and there's a minhag to be mekel, which I'm not discussing. That's not the point of of anything I'm saying. But if they would know, I just felt if people would know this shayla, then they wouldn't rely on flatbush on chalav stam. They would be machmer when they could. Maybe formula they would be mekel, but they wouldn't be mekel for Haagen-Dazs. So So I started to compile my information, and I went to Rabbonim. I started speaking to Rabbonim, and like a lot of Rabbonim told me, yeah, of course it's usher. Like, what are you like? Like you just discovered America 500 years late. I was late to the thing. This was when I was born. I was 2 years old, but I didn't know exactly like what to do. A lot of Rabbonim were telling me it was usher. A lot of Rabbonim who prominent Rabbonim, reliable Rabbonim, they said it's a problem, and I just didn't figure out what was going on. It was like a personal commotion, this whole issue that nobody cared about it. I started compiling my notes, which is the first half of the Sefer, on the Treifahs, trying to like raise awareness that people should know that surgeries make the animals treif. And according to a lot of poskim, Rabbi Belsky and Rabbi Heinemann, I'm not telling anybody not to or to. That's not my job. But if people will know, I just felt that people will know that the heterim were not as simple as it sounded. Or when people say, which like really irks me, when people say, "Oh, the cow lives 12 months after the surgery," that's like you didn't even open the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says that a cow that has vaday treifas done to it, even if it lives, is treif. It doesn't make a difference what happens to the cow. The cow could have 200 descendants listening in Kailo. The cow's usher. It's a Ramah. It's from a Rashba. It's a Rambam. There's Chubas. The Svaras or whatever you want to say. It's usher. That's what the Ramah says. So people didn't know this, and it was just like. I was like, I don't want to say appalled, but like I couldn't, because there are Rabbonim who said something. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. That's the honest truth. I couldn't figure out what was going on with the whole situation.
Right. Okay. So first of all, you make a good point. We were not discussing Chalav Stam at all. I think that should have been clear, but it's good you emphasize we're not discussing that. That's not the point of this. Everyone can do whatever their local LOR, whatever they hold. But that's not the point of the conversation. This is a conversation about this topic. Just you went into this, you went to look through it. And we're just talking about the Sefer. So spoiler alert, you come out at the end that it's not an issue at all. It's funny because I posted on Twitter. I said, "Oh, I'm going to be doing." I posted the Sefer. I'm going to be doing it, and someone's like, "Someone's trying to reignite controversy." And I responded. I knew your conclusion, but I wrote like, "Why don't you read the Sefer?" I think that's what I wrote. I wanted to write like, "Why don't you read the book? Don't just comment on Twitter that like about somebody." You're not trying to reignite any controversy. You were, like you said, you were learning the sugi. You were going through it, and you're trying to come up with what's going on. Obviously, like you said, you were going through the Treifah thing. So then you, I won't talk for you, but it seems like I clarify this. If it's not, you went and you rolled it back all the way to the beginning to the DA, right? That's what it's called. And you went back to look at what was going on with the cows. So explain the process of what was your research there, and what did you end up coming up? How did you come up with at the end that it's not an issue?
Right. So at the time when I was compiling my surgery, when I was doing my research into the surgeries, I kept on doing research. I kept on like contacting as many professors as I could, because everybody was giving me like a new chachma. More or less, they were all saying the same thing. It seems that's how they're taught, and they have methods. But I was shooting out questions. Now, I was shooting out questions to professors. Let's say 6 questions, I believe it was. The first 5 were all related to the surgeries, how they puncture it, where they cut, all this stuff. And then my 6th question was, I was asking them if they could tell me the incidence, the percentage of disease on the farms. Hopefully they would. Professors don't really go on farms. Many of them do. Many of them go, they survey, they go for different reasons, for the state, for their like council for farms. But I didn't really have the best contacts for it, and some veterinarians were nice and they gave me some, but I was emailing them and asking them if they could be nice and share some relevant statistics about the disease, of how often and how prevalent it is on farms.
Right. I think you mentioned, we forgot to mention in the beginning that you did talk to a professor, right? That was one of the big ones, the one that like was involved. Everyone was quoting him in the country. Yes. What was his name? What was that?
Dr. Stephen Eicher.
Right.
Yeah. He was. Yeah. So that's the next. So what happened basically was so as I was going through it, like in the beginning, there was a woman in California from I think Berkeley Davis. I don't know I forgot what the college was already. It's 4 years ago. I've been doing this for a long time already. This is so she said, like, I don't have statistics for you, but there's a report from the government from 2014 which puts the number at 2.2%. So that already like raised some, like, set me off a little bit, because the Rabbonim that dealt with the Shaila all assumed that there was no shishim. There's no bittul against them. Meaning like this, even if the cow is treif, even if we assume the cow is 100% treif, doesn't mean the milk is asr necessarily. That cow's milk is asr. But the milk in a farm is mixed up from many cows. Now, if there's more than 60 times that cow's milk on the farm, the milk would be mutter because it's batal. So what did the Rabbonim who asr, what did they do with this? So you read all the tshuvas, it's clear that they many of them assume it, but most of them write Barachal B'Tcha Ktana, they put it out straight, clear. They say that the incidence was above Shishim. Shishim is 1.6%. They say it was above that. They quote numbers of 5 to 15%. Rav Menashe Cohen, Rav Yitzchak Stein, he's the Faltachan Dayan in Borough Park. Who else quoted 5 to 15%? He also quoted 5 to 50%. Rav Mendel Zilber quoted 5 to 50%. Many Rabbanim quoted 5 to 15% as a number. And it seems to be coming from a certain report. The lead on this was Rabbi Bleich wrote an article on the Shiloh also. He wrote that Dr. Stephen Eicher had a report. It was a not published report from him, but he had the numbers at 5 to 15%, which is very high. And they all wrote that there's no shishim, there's no bittul, so there was no avenue to permit the milk from there. So they were all busy writing tshuvas. Everybody was busy writing tshuvas for the surgery aspect. They were not dealing with the issue of the percent of the actual disease. Right? Rabbi Menashe Klein wrote in his tshuva, he said that since the surgeries are done on the statistics are muchachas, statistica muchachas, that there is between 5 and 15%. He says between 10 and 15%, 10 and 15% in the entire state, in the entire country. He says it's usher to go and buy the milk because we know in this country, in this state, that it's very common, and you have to be choishish for it even without knowledge. Meaning you have to assume every farm has a high percentage. That was the assumption from the Rabbonim here. And that report that lady, that professor had sent me, was not checking out. 2.2%, yes, it is above 1.6, but it's way, a lot below 5%. I got numbers from even earlier, right? That's 2014. The report was earlier, but in 2007 there was a report that was I think 2.8%. It was all around. It was much lower than what the Rabbonim were saying. So that rang a bell with me. And at the same time, one of the professors that was helping me with the surgeries, he actually invented one of the surgeries, the toggle surgery, the toggle method. His name is Keith Sterner. He helped me very much with one of the issues of the Treifahs. He told me that I should contact the professor in Cornell, who actually dealt with the Rabbonim when the Shiloh started. And that professor said that most large herds in New York State have well below 2%. That's what he said. So I already saw that something's going on here with the numbers, and I wanted to research that more.
Okay, so obviously you're saying that these numbers, I don't know if we explained clearly, those numbers is an issue because it wasn't a big issue because, like you're saying, it's batal b'shishim. Because the milk gets all mixed up, if it's below 1.6%, it's irrelevant whether they have this issue and then they do the surgery, whether or not the specific surgery makes it a treifah. We can get into that at the end, but just regardless, it's not going to be a problem. And they were assuming it was this higher number. So now you had, like you said, these conflicting reports. You're speaking. So what'd you do from there? How did you research this further to find out what's really going on?
Right. So what happened was I started to contact again. I restarted my emails and I started trying to get actual farms details. One of my friends gave me a very good eitzah how to contact farms, Usher Fried. He gave me a new avenue because I was not having success. And I started contacting farms and I got responses. I sent out, I would say 4,000 emails to farmers. I got like 400 responses, like 10% of that. Pretty good. They thought I was PETA, a lot of them. They thought I was trying to figure out if the cruelty issues to the cows. So I told them I don't like PETA, whatever. I was trying to, I had to get through to them. So Baruch Hashem, I was able to successfully get a lot of information. And what was unbelievable was that I was getting a totally different view of the picture than what the Rabbonim were assuming. The Rabbonim, the Shiloh came up on farms that the Rabbonim were on. They were producing Chalav Yisrael. Mashgichim were there. They saw the cows. They knew the numbers. They couldn't be matter on shishim. They couldn't use bittul. They had to use the avenue of the surgery approach, right? Even the Rabbonim at the time, they wrote a lot of heterim on the surgery for the cheeses and the hefzer meruba and all that I mentioned. But who's to say that just because of what they saw on the farms that they were on, that necessarily means that was going on in America? Now, that was the assumption here. Everybody was assuming that. All the Rabbonim in the Tshuvas at least seem to assume that. Some write that explicitly, that every farm in America has treifahs. But what I was getting was a little different picture. I got farms that were telling me that they haven't had the issues in decades. They were working on preventive measures. Again, what's the disease? Displaced abomasum. Comes transition stage cows when they are after birth, when they start lactating, when they have issues of they're consuming food and their intake is higher and they have that stress. A lot of farms work on preventative measures. They have nutritionists and they give special feed. They make sure the cows are in special corrals and that they don't have stress and they don't push them for milk production. They don't have any issues at all. They prevent it. They have people monitoring it. People use boluses. They put stuff into cows to monitor their temperature and other issues because this disease is usually a result of other diseases. So they're watching the cows. So there were a lot of farms that had no issues at all. One veterinarian told me she used to do 30 surgeries a month. And now she does one because cows are working, because a lot of farms for many years are already working on prevention. So that was, first of all, I found a lot of farms that were working to prevent it. Then I had farms that did have high numbers and they sold the cows. They didn't even do the surgery. Now, again, the disease does not make the cow into a treifah. So you have a farm with 10% of cows that have displaced abomasum. They're not treif, only if they do surgery, only if they operate on them. These farmers didn't operate on them. Surgery costs $300. A new cow's $900. They'd rather invest in a new cow. They don't buy cars. They lease cars. That's how they are. Some were big farms. Some of them, the financials of every farm was relevant. Some farm only did surgery. He told me, one guy said, I can't afford to not do surgery. I can't afford a new cow. I have to invest in this cow. I have to pay $300. I can't afford the $900. So that was another one. Then I had farms that were treif. There were farms that had above shishim, and they did do surgery. And they did surgeries in a way that made it treif. That was a problem. Then there was a farm there were many farms that they did surgeries in ways that didn't make them treif. Then there were farms that rolled the cows. It was a whole, I want to say mishmash. Everything was different. Every farm had a different story. Every farm had a different concern, different considerations when they were dealing with the cows. And there was definitely not there was no one size approach to this whole shayla. And I started speaking to experts about the shayla to try to figure out if this is what they see also. And they said, yeah, every farm has different things. One of the professors in Utah, he's been on 25% of farms in Utah. He told me most farms for years are already selling cows, just more financially. It's a smarter option for them. Another person told me that he works as a preventative measures on those things. There was all different things. And there were definitely farms that were treif. There were definitely farms that were kosher. So I started to contact again, and I was contacting professors, and what they were getting is like what I said, that there was no one size fits all to all farms. Every farm was a different story. So I went back and I was matzliach. I was able to contact this Dr. Eicher, who was the source of the statistics, and I asked him what was going on. Right, he's quoting Rabbi Bleich's article, and it seems to be he's the one that all the Rabbanim are coming from. So I asked him why everybody's quoting his numbers, all the Rabbanim. So he said, it's very simple. He said, when the Shiloh came up, he didn't say Shiloh, but he said when the issue came up, so Cornell University is on the East Coast. So the Rabbanim went upstate to Cornell in Ithaca, and Cornell is one of the biggest dairy, has a very big dairy department. So they all came there, and his report was the only one, or one of the only ones that were published. So they were all either quoting his numbers or sending them to him. He said he spoke to every Rav. He said from different, he told me Hasidic Rabbanim and not Hasidic Rabbanim. It's very interesting. He remembered it was almost 30 years ago. And he told me that he spoke to all of them. He was the source of the numbers. And I asked him, I said, what's going on? The numbers they're not fitting with what I'm seeing. So he said, listen, he said, I never meant this to be a report on what's going on in America. He's like, I didn't even mean it to be a report on what's going on in New York, not even the western region of New York. This had nothing to do with that. He said, what I was trying to do was figure out something else. I was trying to figure out diseases' effects on cows' milk production. He said, and I wanted to get accurate statistics. So I went to a certain veterinarian. I asked him for his records, and based on his records, which I knew were accurate because he gave me his records, I published my report. He said it was one veterinarian. It was 26 farms near each other. They all had the same nutritionist. That's what he told me. He said that's what we call in academics a convenience sample. A convenience sample means, he said, if you would stand in front of a grocery store and you would wait at 7 to 8 at night and you would ask everybody, let's see, I want to see who drinks more Coke or Pepsi for supper. So you'd wait outside from 7 to 8 and you'd ask 100 people, 75 say they drink Coke, 25 Pepsi. You say, 75% of people drink Coke, 25% drink Pepsi. He said that's not a sample. Sample has to sample all, it has to be able to be inclusive of all different populations and however it works. He said that's not a good sample. He said this is what my sample was. It was not a representative sample. It wasn't even representative of a region of New York, Kosher New York, and Kosher America. Now again, New York in those days had 11,000 farms. So we're talking about his report was 26 farms on 11,000. That's under 1%. It's a very small sample to go and to decide that what he saw was on all the other farms. And he didn't say that. He said he never meant that. He just said that was the numbers they were asking me, and that was the numbers I had. So I provided it to them. But he said it was not representative. And he said, of course, every farm has different numbers. And of course, every farm has different calculations and considerations. And what they do is always different. So it's just not representative. And he told me that, like, you can't, he said, every state, it could vary from farm to farm what they do. So it said that, like, I should not put any significance to his numbers.
Right. So what I know about the dairy farms in New York is from constitutional law. So some famous cases. So when you mentioned just a couple of things to follow up on. You mentioned there are 11,000 farms in New York. At that point, there was. I mean, New York is a big state in dairy production. Right? I just want to clarify. What do we know? Do you know what it was then and what it is now percentage of the U.S. to give listeners an idea?
Yes. So New York today, actually, California is the biggest dairy production. I think then is Wisconsin, then New York, Pennsylvania's up there. Idaho now is big. New York had 11,000 farms when the Shiloh came up. America had 150,000 farms. New York today has about 4,000 farms. And America has about 30 to 35,000 farms. The farms numbers have been decreasing because farms are consolidating. The smaller farms are going out of business, and they're not profitable, and that's why many farms are just gearing towards the larger part, which leads me to something else that this Dr. Eicher told me. He told me this was something that I discussed with him, but I also discussed with another professor in Cornell. The professor in Cornell told me another very interesting point. Meaning, besides the fact that every farm has different numbers and was mutter and usser, some were mutter, some were usser, he said that, let's say I give you two numbers. One professor was very nasty to me. He said, you're wasting your time. You don't know what you're doing. He said, let's say I give you two farms numbers. One farm has 10% and they do surgeries. And one farm has 1% and doesn't do surgeries. And you're going to say, oh, so these are only two farms and one's kosher and one's non-kosher. He said, that's one way to look at it. He said, but what if I tell you the farm with 10% that does surgeries has 100 cows, and the farm that has 1% has 1,500 cows? He said, it's 15 times as big. Do you think that you should look at the milk that way, the same way? He said, 15 times the amount of milk is coming out of the other farm. He said, you're not looking at milk production. You're looking very narrowly. So that also opened a whole new thing, because he told me with his experience that larger farms, since they are better off financially, they have a much easier time dealing with the cows and preventing them, and they sell the cows much more often. So there was another consideration besides for what I mentioned before, that farms of all sizes had different approaches. Some did surgeries and some didn't. A lot of the large farms in America, a lot of the milk in America, most of the milk in America comes from large farms, and the milk was coming from large farms. And according to him and other experts, and I've seen that with my data. My data is not representative, but from my data, I think I got like 50 to 60 large farms. They were all very significantly low numbers. Even the ones that had higher, many of them sold them. So a lot of the milk, it's very possible a majority of the milk, which is coming from large farms, doesn't even have the Shiloh. I don't know that. I didn't contact most large farms. But that's what they were saying, that you can't look at the Shiloh just as farm. You have to look at it as milk production. And it was a very interesting. It shed a lot of light on the shayla. So like I was dealing with two parts of the shayla. I was dealing with the actual dairy, like the farm thing, and I was dealing now with the milk production, which led me into the way milk is produced. But that's basically what I'm trying to say is that it seems that the statistics that were being, what the Rabbonim were assuming was based on statistics of a very small sample, which may not represent what was going on in America, and maybe it didn't represent what's going on in America then either.
Right. So that we won't get, we'll leave it at that for regarding the different states and the big and small farms. I think people can read, you have in your Sefer, which is now available to purchase. We'll include a link in the show's notes, and people can, it's in the farm stores. And also you have a small English write-up that people can contact you. You'll give them your email and I'll put it in the show's notes that people can contact and read more about that in there. But what I do want to mention, even though you say there's big farms and small farms, how many farms overall though did you contact, and like what percentage of is like overall farms in this state and like in the country is that? I'm just curious.
Oh, so I sent about 3,500, 4,000 emails. I got 380 responses or 350. I don't remember, 380 for sure, 380 farms. Maybe more. Some of them I just couldn't make out what their kosher status was. So 3,500 farms when I was doing it was approximately the amount I contacted was approximately 10% of farms in America. I got 10% of that, so it's about 1% of farms in America. Now, I understand that 1% is not a sample that I'm going to now say that this is definitely what's happening in America. I'm not saying I know what's going on every farm. That's not the purpose here, and I'll explain, I guess, later why this should make a difference halachically. But my sample size was way more than the one the Rabbonim were basing on. The numbers that I had, Dr. Eicher was 26 farms that he reported on. The Rabbonim weren't on that. But the Rabbonim on, let's say, on 5-10 farms. We're dealing with 380 farms. Now, that's a lot. It's a much higher number than what the Rabbonim were dealing with.
Right. Okay. You can go into it now already. With all this stuff, but just want to mention now once we're talking about it. So you only did 1%. How does that really halachically? And let's bring your research to halacha. So now that you did this research, you're coming out with the numbers. Obviously, we didn't get, like I said, I don't know. You can mention here, but I don't know how specific we're going to get here on a podcast about numbers. It's in your article. It's in the Sefer even more. So we don't have to But how does that? You can talk a little about the numbers that you ended up getting to very different farms, and how does halachically now. Why is that not an issue then?
Right. So I spent a lot of time in writing up in my Sefer. It's in Semenya tests. Anybody who wants to see it, it's all the information is there. They could see the statistics and the amount of farms, right? I contacted 380 farms. 75% were kosher, 25% were not. That is not, I'm not saying that's a sample in America, but that was from my numbers. It's all there, all the information. And I wrote over there about what they do and the way they deal with the cows, and all that's over there. If somebody wants to see that by arichas at length, you can see it over there. What was relevant to me was that this is a very important question, what you're asking. Now, even I'm admitting, and this is a fact, you don't need me to admit it, there are farms that are not kosher. There are farms that have a high number, and they do surgery that make a treif. So, meaning if you don't go, like those Rabbonim who are matter, if you hold the surgeries, make a cow treif, there are farms in America that are treif. So how do you buy a bottle of milk in the store? So this was another thing the Rabbonim wrote about. They wrote that it's efshel vuri. One could determine where his milk came from, and determine the statistics. And therefore, even though there, let's say, are whatever number of kosher farms, but since there are also non-kosher farms, you have to be chayshish. You have to suspect that maybe your milk came from a farm that was that had treifas, that had cows that were operated on. So I started to look into that also, and I think it was a misunderstanding of how the dairy process works. And again, this is all the difference between Chalav Yisrael and Chalav Stam in the Shiloh. Chalav Yisrael, again, the mashgichim are on the farms. They see the cows. They speak to the managers, right? They signing contracts coming down. They could sign whatever they want. They could check anything they want, and they do. They claim they remove the cows. However, Chalav Stam, milk is not the way people think. Many people think that milk is just milked on the farm, put into a bottle on the farm, and sent to the store. That's not how it goes. I just want to give like a mushal. I have like if you have a bottle from Target, there's a code on every bottle of milk, a code. If you look at the top, even the Chalav Yisrael have it. There's a code. And Target has a company, Good and Gather. That's their company. It says on it 34-1594. That's what it says. So I'll just give a shtickle beer or what those words mean, like explanation. There's a website, Where's My Milk From? You put that code in, you can find out where your milk was processed. The first two numbers, 34-1594. 34 is the state. 34 is New Jersey. 36 is New York. 42 is Pennsylvania. I think 12, I believe, is Florida. 16, I think, is Maryland. There are different things. We're going to deal with 34, New Jersey. So we're dealing with milk that was processed at a plant in New Jersey. 1594. 1594 is the name of the plant's identification. It's in Burlington, New Jersey. 45 minutes from BMG. Anybody could go check out the plant. It's a big plant. So this is the bottle of milk. Let's say we'll just talk about now. So the milk that I have now in front of me came from this farm, from this plant in Burlington, New Jersey. Now you could go onto Google Maps. You could see there are 10 big silos in the plant, 10 big things where they store milk. Now what happens is that farmers they don't sell you milk. It's not directly from them. It comes from that plant. Farmers sell the milk to the plant. They're part of co-ops, cooperatives, which ensure that their milk gets sold. A famous one, Dairy Farmers of America, represents thousands of farms. They go pick up the milk from the farm. They send a truck, and the farm goes and brings the milk to the plant. Now, a farm that has 300 cows is not producing enough milk to fill up a tanker. So that truck goes, picks up the milk, takes the tanker, drives to the next farm down the block, and picks up milk from there. Then it goes to another farm, and then it goes to another farm, or if it's full, it goes to the plant. It arrives at the plant, and they put the milk into the silo. Now, this happens, as I mentioned, this plant in Burlington has I think 10 silos, whatever, has a lot of silos. It means that it's dealing with dozens of farms' milks, maybe hundreds. Now, how is somebody supposed to trace milk in such a situation? First of all, the reason why I shouldn't even be myrich on this is because try calling the plant. If they pick up the phone, I want somebody to call me. Please tell me. There's no success. I've tried. I've emailed. I did everything I could. That's first of all. You can't get through. You can't get through. Second of all, they don't need. They have no achrayas to you. You're not a consumer. They don't have it. They're a consumer. They don't care about you. But besides for that, what are they supposed to tell you? It came from this silo. Now, what are they going to know? Now, they have information on which trucks dropped it off by them. So they could go to the trucker. They could get, okay, this truck went to 5 farms. And then they know in that silo, there were these 10 trucks. So these 10 trucks went to these 50 farms. Now, here are these 50 farms. Go have a nice day and find out where your milk came from. Besides the fact you're not going to get that information, if you get that information, I would appreciate if somebody could send it to me. But you're not even going to, even if you get that, what are you supposed to do then? Now, again, I want to clarify, before I clarify the halacha part of it, I just want to say IBM, I by chance got a podcast by IBM. They're dealing with this issue. IBM wants to try to stop waste. And there's a very big issue. When one farm has contamination, they have to throw out the entire plant's day's milk. All the milk that was in the plant that day goes in the garbage. Now, why? There was only one farm that had contamination. Find out what bottles came from that farm and throw out only those bottles. What's the answer? Because they can't. It's all mixed up. So IBM is trying. They're setting up blockchain. They're working on it. This was 2 years ago. I listened to the podcast. There's no new information on it. It doesn't seem like it has been going anywhere. Maybe it will one day. But IBM says that if you listen to it, there's no way to trace milk to the source farm. That's why they have to throw it out. So there's really not a shayla. I mean, I confirmed it with experts. One expert told me, he said, whoever says that you could trace milk, he said he'd have an easier time tracing where the wood in his table came from in his dining room, which tree it came from, than finding out which farm it came from. That's what one person told me. And he hung up the phone. Now, that was on that aspect. Now, what does this mean halachically? My entire shayla, which I did not mention, I didn't emphasize this, but the entire issue issue that we're dealing with, again, chalav stam, we're dealing with the issue of the treifahs. The treifahs, let's assume the treifahs make the cows 100% non-kosher. Now, we said that it's usher. The milk is usher. The milk is not usher midaraisa. It's not usher minat Torah, right? For it to be usher minat Torah, you would have to say 51% of the milk on every farm's tank came from cows that were operated on. Nobody thinks that most cows on a farm are operated on. It's a minority, so it's for sure batal b'roiv. It's for sure an issa d'rabbanan to start. So we're dealing with an issa d'rabbanan. Now, as I told you before, there are farms that are kosher, there are farms that are not kosher. Now, you can't trace it's impossible to trace where your milk came from. So now I have this bottle from Target, 1534, 1594. I know it's from Burlington. It's an Isser D'Rabbanan at most, but it's not a Vadai Isser. Again, the Rabbanans have to be Asr Bevada to be Asr. It has to be Vadai Isser. The threshold for the Rabbanan is higher than the Deraisa. The Deraisa suffix is Asr. You have a doubt, you have to be stringent on a Deraisa. But on a Rabbanan, it has to be a Vadai. Nobody could tell me that the milk I got from Target, this good and gather milk, is Asr Bevadai. How could you can't trace the milk? Maybe it came from a farm that was kosher. Maybe it came from a farm that was not kosher, but it's a suffix. It's a bona fide suffix. And since it's a suffix, it's a Isser D'Rabbanan at most, and it's a suffix because it came from a farm that was kosher, and one cannot trace it. So therefore, it's not. It should be mutter. That's basically what my heter is. Now, I just want to point out, even if somebody wants to say that you could trace milk, even if it is, which I firmly and strongly say it's not correct, but if somebody wants to say you could trace milk, we have to realize something. We're dealing with an Isser D'Rabbanan at most, a suffix Isser D'Rabbanan, right? Suffix D'Rabbanan, the chiv to be mevar or suffix D'Rabbanan is only if it's bekal. There's no chiv to do it betircha. There's no tircha like this tircha. Getting through to the plant, getting the numbers, then you have to realize that even if you get those 50 farms' names, you're going to go to the farm and you're going to ask them, can you tell me your numbers? Why? They have no achrayas to tell you. They may not even keep records. This is such a far-fetched thing that this chiv levruri, it's besides the fact that they're not even going to pick up the phone to start, and besides the fact that you can't trace it, but even if it would be possible, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, and at most, it only needs to be traced if it would be easy, bekal, and it's not. So it seems to be, in my opinion, it's not a shayla, that the milk should be mutter. All chal stam is the suffix. When you buy it in a store, you don't know where it came from. Now, of course, if you have a cow in front of you that had surgery on it, then it comes back into Rabbi Balski, Rabbi Heinemann territory. You have to know how you pass on that. But that's not what the shayla by chal stam. Chal stam, the milk is mixed in. The farm it's mixed in from a lot of different farms. So the shayla really seems to be pasha that the milk should be mutter. I'm not paskening. I'm just presenting my opinion. And I just want to point out an interesting thing that based on this information, people who were consuming chalav stam their whole lives and never ate chalav Yisrael, they would have an advantage back in the 1994 when the shayla came up, because till chalav Yisrael were makbid on cow removal, they had the issue, right? They knew their farms, they were on the farms, and they saw that there was no shishim, there was no bittul, so they had to use other heterim for the surgeries, which were not lechatchila. But chalav stam seemingly was always mutter, it was always a suffix. Nobody knew where it came from. One of the biggest, I told this to one of the biggest paiskim in America, and he told me 100%. He said it was always an advantage of chalav stam. He was not, again, endorsing chalav stam. He said, definitely, this was an advantage that chalav stam had at the time. It was never a problem. So I was happy. He said he was been saying this for years. I was happy. I was mechaven to what he said.
So what was the feedback you got on this research? Obviously, you're not a plastick and you're getting this research and you're saying coming at this conclusion. What was the feedback? So we can start, by the way, with askamas on your Sefer, or you can do that after. However, you can tell me who you got askamas from. I'm sure the listeners want to hear. You have a lot of askamas. Tell the listeners you're not going to put out a Sefer like this without, I don't assume. So you could say the feedback, the askamas, however you want to go. The askamas are feedback. There are some interesting things in the askamas.
My askamas, I Baruch Hashem was zoichet to very nice askamas from very, very prominent big Rabbonim. But there were a lot of Rabbonim that I got, so that I had dealt with the shayla that unfortunately did not give me askamas, but were very enthusiastic with what I wrote. So I wrote all this information up in a 14-page paper in English. I sent it to Rabbonim and I presented it to people, and I would say 99% praised it very much, and they were very happy for many reasons. Some were for Chalvis, some were sympathetic to Chalav Stam, and some because of the other issues in Stam that people shouldn't be nichshal. Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael isn't and hasn't been nichshal in Treifahs, which is a shayla chamura. Some of them were very helpful. Some of them, there were Rabbonim who were, when really people weren't paying much attention when I was coming to them, there were some that were extraordinarily helpful and listening. One is Rav Kalman Epstein, who I was zeichet to get a haskama from. And I went even to Eisrim. I went back to the Eisrim, and some of them were receptive to what I said. They said that they heard what I was saying, and a few Hasidic Rabbanim said this is a big tayalus even for them. There were I just want to say one of the most prominent Eisrim who told me that he said that he will not give me haskama because he feels like it would be an endorsement on Chalav Stam. Told me that another reason he doesn't want to give haskama is because the metzias can change. I just want to deal with this for 1 second here. People are going to say the metzias could change. Now, again, the metzias could change, right? That's true. But the onus is going to be on the Isram to say it's Asr. Again, this is a suffix Isser. It's mutter. For somebody to say it's Asr, they're going to have to say that the milk in your bottle, all farms have treifahs. I don't know what they're going to do. But I discussed this with him and I told him, I said, that's not the way it seems. It doesn't seem that it's going to ever become Asr because I don't know if anybody in the kashrus industry will ever have information on all the farms. I don't know if the farmers are going to share information, and we're never going to know for sure where your milk came from. Unless you tell me that you know on every farm in America, the 35,000 farms that are currently around, they have surgeries. Kol kavod, somebody wants to get information on that, they could get that. But that's the onus is, the ball is in their court. And somebody who wants to aser, it's becheskas heter. And when I told it to him, he agreed, and he said, it's still Chalav Stam, he doesn't want to give a haskama.
Okay, so I will mention, you have haskama here from Renata Greenblatt, Shmuel Kamenetsky, Shlomo Miller, Reb Reuven Feinstein, who interesting talks about his father's psak on Chalav Stam, Ramesh's psak. He mentioned talks about haskama. So interesting
historic haskama.
Yeah, he mentions it here. People can read the haskama. Rabbi Shmuel first from Chicago, Rabbi Forsheimer from Lakewood, Rabbi Yebrudny, Reb Kamenetsky, like you mentioned, Mordechai Yafin. And you have here also Feinstein. What does it go over? Beryl Feinstein, right?
Yeah. So I just want to talk about
David's son. So they mentioned him a second. You'll go back to a second. David's son, and you have Baruch Maskowitz, and then you have from Gordimer, right? From the OU.
Right. So I just want to mention a few things about the haskamas that Baruch Hashem was zeicha to. Reb David has held the milk as mutter for the Shiloh, and I've heard it from his mouth. I know like 12 people who heard it from his mouth. I was zeicha to be able to present this information to him. B'chayav, Aydei's Talmud, Reb Baruch Maskowitz. He wrote in his letter in the beginning of my Sefer. He wrote that he presented the information to Reb David, and one of the other Rabbonim asked me to get from Rabbi Baruch Feinstein as well, saying that his father held this mutter. Rabbi Baruch did not write about my sefer actually, but he wrote that Rabbi David held this mutter. So that's on that end. Rabbi David was very adamant that it's mutter always, and he was very, as I heard, I did not see Rabbi David's reaction, but per his Talmud, he was very happy with the information. He had held this mutter for similar reasons, and he was enthusiastic. That's why I heard that it was mutter. And also, of course, the last letter I have over there, the last haskama from Rabbi Gordimer, who is considered by many the biggest expert on milk in America. He helped me very much, clarified a lot of stuff. He knows as much and more than many dairy experts that spend their time trying to figure it out. I mean, I didn't go through every part of the dairy thing, but there are some things I read, books and articles and everything I figured out to the T, and he was holding with me when I was calling him, and he helped me very much, and he was very enthusiastic about the Sefer.
Okay, so what would you say when we get to the end? The purpose, the point of the Sefer? Is it to tell people it's mutter? Is it just to present your research, purely just like theoretical base? I mean, it's just for learning. I mean, what do you think the point is?
So I'll tell you, the purpose is twofold. I compile my information on the surgeries. If somebody ever wants to learn, if they have a cow in front of them that had surgery, or they want to know the Shiloh, the Rabbonim wrote on it. That's the first half of my Sefer. It's called Treifah. I compiled all the details of the surgery. I wrote an introduction detailing the specific surgeries that they use and the way that it's done. And then based on that, I have simanim on the surgeries that we can figure out. Person can figure out what the halacha is. That's one thing. It's what Tayalas Hawaimid. Hopefully, I hope people look at that. And then the second half of the Sefer is on the tzad that the cows are treif, why the milk should still be mutter, which is based on my research on that, what I presented before, that the milk is, that there are farms that are kosher and there are farms that are not kosher, and that it's not possible to trace the milk. And that's all in Be'ikr and Siman Yates, in the second half of the Sefer, in the 19th Siman. That's where I deal with the facts, with the dairy process, with what's going on farms. I also deal with a little bit about the large farms versus small farms, about how milk travels from state to state, which is another important thing, that people think that milk stays, New York milk that's milked here stays in New York. That's not true. 20% of milk in New York leaves the state, goes to New England, goes to Pennsylvania. A trucker told me he drove milk from Idaho, 2,500 miles, that was milked in Idaho to New York. Milk goes everywhere. A guy from New England told me he drove milk from New England down to Georgia. Milk goes everywhere. So there's no way, people think that they're going to be able to just get information about a farm, figure out exactly what's going on. It's not that simple. I hope people look over there. And again, I am not imposing, I am not a paisik, I am not imposing my psak on anyone. Everybody should look into them themselves. All I'm saying is that this is really the main purpose of my sefer. I want the issue to be revisited. I don't think it was dealt with correctly originally, in my opinion. The way it was analyzed, mitzad the mitzias, mitzad how to look at, forgetting like a bird's eye view, forgetting about the surgeries, thinking about chalav stam, where it comes from, and that there may be other methods. I hope people look at it and it, food for thought. People look into it, come to their own conclusions. They don't have to accept what I say about Safek D'Rabbanan Makua. I feel strongly about it. Again, it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan at most, and it's not possible to be traced, and there are kosher farms. But people could look at it, they could come to their own conclusions, and there are more heterim based on it. I'm not going to go into it here. I presented in my sefer that the milk is mutter because of Safek D'Rabbanan Makua, because again, it's a Issa D'Rabbanan at most, and it's a Safek where it came from. It could be it came from a kosher farm. There are paiskim, I heard this from two paiskim, two Gedolia paiskim's mouth, that said, based on my information, that it could be it's called the parish Meruba parish also. You say you go basaroiv. I didn't write that in the sefer. That was not my avenue, but it could be there are a lot of other heterim that could be used here. And people should realize that even if somebody wasn't so sympathetic towards the matirim and the surgery, but when you have this heter, it could be that the heterim for the surgery are even easier to be relied on, because if it's really mutter, so then you could say maybe other heterim for the surgeries. That I heard from one place. He said that based on your information, which he holds as mutter gamri, based on what I said, he felt that you could even say that the surgeries are mutter. Whatever, that's for a person to decide, not me. I really want the issue to be revisited. It's been like thrown into the dustbins of history. People think chalav stam eaters. There are Rabbonim, prominent Rabbonim in Flatbush that have been telling their mispaulim and their talmidim. There's a very big paisik in Lakewood who says that it's asur. And I just want people to look into the shower again. It's a very practical shower. We're not only talking about people who eat Haagen-Dazs. It's relevant for dairy equipment. It's relevant for formula, for elderly. It's a very negedig shower. And I feel like it should be revisited, and yishma chacham v'yesef lakach. That's what I hope.
Okay, so like I said, it's available now in farm stores, and we'll post the link. I'll post a link where people can purchase it, but they can purchase it on a variety of websites and farm stores. Also, like I said, you do have that English write-up, so I think people can email you. I don't know, I'll put your email, but you want to tell people your email. Can they contact you? Is it available that you can send them just the English short synopsis? Obviously, there's much more in the sefer.
Yeah. So if people want the English, they could do it, but I did a much better job in the sefer. Just it's much clearer. But they could email me at you'll put the email on, I guess, mmblumenfrucht@gmail.com. It should be in oldest farm stores, hopefully. I mean, it is in oldest farm stores. I don't know what I'm saying. It's in oldest farm stores in Monsey, in Lakewood. It's going to be in Judaica Plaza. It's going to be in Monsey, in Lishkas, Americas, and the Zindel Bermans and Eichhorst. It's going to be around Biegeleisen. I think it's even getting to Baltimore and to Shopsy. So it's going to be around. And hopefully, the purpose of the Sefer, again, is I want people to revisit the issue. The Olam could say what they want to say. The Olam could say their opinions. The Olam should look into it. But I'm not coming to say I sealed the book, just to open the book. Everybody should go and look into it themselves. They could feel free to whatever they want to do.
Okay, perfect. And so just finally, what are you doing next? Are you going to do in Chalav Stam? Are you done with milk? I just do that. I'm not saying that you're doing that. Are you working on something else? Are you just taking a break? No,
so it's interesting. I didn't plan to write this sefer. Just Baruch Hashem, it fell into my lap. But as I was doing the research on the traceability, so something interesting came up about Chalav Stam, which I'm just going to put out the theory. Again, my Sefer does not deal with Chalav Stam. It said it in the Sefer, I think 4 times. It's only for those who eat Chalav Stam. It's nothing to do with Chalav Stam. The only one who speaks about Chalav Stam in my Sefer is Rabbonim Feinstein. In the Haskama, I don't endorse, not endorse. I'm not qualified for that. It's just that when I was doing my research about the traceability, the truckers were telling me, the truckers and the dairy experts were telling me that the process of how they pick up farm, right? They pick up milk from different farms. So what they do is they go to a farm, they take a sample of the milk. From the farm has a bulk tank. Every farm has where all the milk is stored. They take a sample. They test it for antibiotics to see if a cow received medicine, because that you're not able to sell. You have to discard that milk. And if it passes, they put it into the truck. Then they go to the next farm. They put it into the truck. They test it, put it in the truck. So then they come to the plant. Now the plant, before it unloads that milk, they retest that whole tanker. They don't want to put the tanker into the soil because, again, it will get mixed up and it will contaminate. So they test it again. Now, if they find a positive test of antibiotics, they go back to the samples that they have from the farm that they collected, and they retest it at the plant. Whoever has the highest antibiotics or positive, I don't know how it goes, is responsible to pay for that truck's milk, which is a tremendous amount. It could be a farmer's whole profit for a year. So there is a very big mirsus of playing around with milk. There's also other tests. They do composition, somatic cell, they check fat. There's a Gerber test that they use, a chemical test to see fat content. I didn't look into this. I spoke to a few professors very briefly about it, and I spoke to some Rabbonim, some dairy experts about this, because it should seem that R Manes heter is possibly, which again, this is all just potentially, it could be R Manes heter is stronger than it was back then, because there are other tests that are done to see, and there's a bigger mirsus, there's a bigger fear of penalties, because a farmer knows that if he's caught on a positive test, he's done. Even Rav Yashav, who did not agree with R Manes heter, the way he's quoted is he didn't say that you needed a Jew present at the farm. He says that government supervision, he didn't like it because you could mix up to 2% or 1%. I forgot the exact numbers. Now, if there would be a metzias in the world where you cannot mix up a mashahu into it, let's say there would be some test and it would be done legally required. I don't know if Rav Yashav would be as opposed to Rav Yashav said his issue was that they could mix it up. He wasn't opposed to the use of an anan sahadi for supervision. So that's something that I would like to look into. I spoke to 2 people in the industry. One person said that I'm absolutely not correct, and it would not come up on it's not a mirsus. And one told me it's pashut that it is a mirsus. It's pashut that what I'm saying is correct. I don't know. He said he's been saying it for years. He's like, you didn't even figure out this is not even your discovery. It just came up by the by, but I'm not looking into it. Again, this is all theoretical. I'm not discussing R Manes heter. I didn't discuss R Manes heter in the Sefer. That's for everybody to do what they're doing. It's just maybe something I will look into in the future.
Okay. Very interesting. And, the Sefer is very interesting. So everyone can check it out. Like I said, I'll put a link, check out in this farm store, and put your email address as well. People have questions or comments for you. They want to have the English one. So thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.